Hey Numa fam, we are super excited to be with you guys this morning. We are here together. We're gonna have a conversation about home, okay? But before we dive into the conversation, let's just take a minute. Let's get quiet, let's get still, let's invite God into our space that we find ourselves in this morning. Just take 30 seconds to do that. God, I thank you for this day. I thank you for the opportunity for us to come together and just have a conversation as your sons and daughters around home and around being ourselves as you've created us. We thank you for your presence here with us today. We just honor you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
So we are week 2 of our series on home. We're in week 2, right? So last week, Monty shared a message about Moses and his encounter with Ruel's daughters in the desert at the well. He rescues them. They invite him into their home, right? And he finds a place of belonging there. He starts his journey of learning who he is, his true, authentic self, as God, prepares to encounter him and send him back to rescue his people. So today we are going to talk about being our true authentic selves in home, right? So as we look around the table at each other, right, we probably grew up in different places, in different homes, different cultures, different traditions. So before we get started, let's each just share what is home for you? And I will start with Mr. Andre over here. What is home for Andre?
Yeah, I think home for me is a safe place. It's a place where you really learn and grow in that sense of belonging. There's people who love you, they care for you, they do life with you. I think there's obviously also you grow into responsibilities and accountabilities and stuff, but I feel like mainly home is that place where you grow and are cared for and loved, and enjoy, you have fun.
Yeah. So Ms. Hande, what does home look like for you? What is home?
I think much like Andre, home for me, like the basis of home is safety. Like where I find safety to be myself, safety to be myself. That for me is home. And then there's all the other things that you then add onto it. But I think the foundation for it, for me, is safety.
Yeah, I think for me, home is very similar to what you guys have already said. Like it's a safe place where I feel loved, where I'm surrounded by people that I trust, and people that are going to hold me accountable, right?
Yeah.
So in our conversation today, right, so this is our personal view of home. This is what our personal home is like. So for the conversation today, though, we're going to be talking about like our church home, right? Because we're all part of the same church home. And it's a home that God has built, and we're partnering with him in the building of that home, right? So let's just define what a church home is. So I'm going to give the definition so that we'll all be on the same page. And before you guys out there start Googling the definition of church home, I know that there are several definitions out there. It can be defined in a lot of different ways. But the one that I'm going to give us now is the one that we're going to focus on today. So a church home is a family of people that have created a safe and accountable space to connect, to become whole and be formed and shaped in the image of Christ.
Yeah, I like that.
You like that? That's a good one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good one. So in saying that, okay, so maybe some of us have come from a church home background where it's very monocultural. Right? The people that we're surrounded with, we have the same culture, we have the same likes. Things are pretty similar. Right? And so for some of us in those types of situations, it might be easy for us to kind of hide ourselves. And then you now find you move into a different space and you find yourself coming into a space where there's a lot of different cultures that are represented. Everybody doesn't look the same. Everyone's cultures aren't the same. Everyone's traditions aren't the same. How do you personally embrace that diversity while still being your authentic self in that space? We'll start with you, Andre.
Yeah, I think that that's a bit of a challenge. I think, especially like I'm one who comes out of a
Monocultural.
cultural background, and then you find yourself in a very diverse church where it's exactly like what you said. They look different. They're from different countries, different areas, different ethnicities, and now suddenly I am finding myself in this home. And how do I be authentic when there are people that's different from me? And so yeah, I think first of all, you have to be open. You have to be open in your mind and in your heart. You have to be on that journey. I mean, if you're not, that's a great starting point to find yourself in a suddenly now diverse church. But you have to be open to actually embrace and learn, and not put up the walls, but also to throw down your walls and say, hey, I'm stepping into this new culture, which is a diverse culture, and I want people to get to know me. And so it's that give and take. It's like you have to be open to get to know people, but you also have to be open for people to get to know you. Yeah.
Yeah, Ms. Andre, do you have anything else to add to that? Like how, like coming into a diverse space, how do you embrace the cultures and still be yourself?
I think for me, I've grown up in both. I've grown up in a monoculture and I've grown up in a diverse culture and just bounced between the two. But I think even within diversity, you can find yourself in a church that looks diverse, but does that church celebrate diverse? Does that space celebrate diversity, right? So I've been in diverse spaces, but those spaces may not have lived out diversity. And so now to find myself in Numa, a church home that values diversity, but also lives it out, has been a different experience. So I think for me, I like what Andre was saying, in that you have to open yourself up to people getting to know you and you getting to know people. And so I think when you come into a diverse space that celebrates diversity, they can be a struggle, right? Because you're used to things being done a certain way, you're used to worship looking a certain way, you're used to interactions looking a certain way. And so there may be that initial struggle of, okay, I'm not used to this. How do I carry myself in this space? How do I move in this space? And I think it's normal to have that struggle. But if this home is what you have chosen and this home stands for diversity, then I think there needs to be a level of openness to what diversity truly means, and a level of opening yourself up to being in the space, to being comfortable in the space, and more than that, to celebrating the space, right? Because you can be in a diverse space, but do you celebrate it? So I think for me, the journey of adjusting to the diversity that Numa has been celebrating this diversity, not just taking it as a value, but okay, I'm going to celebrate this. I'm going to be a part of this. I'm going to give myself to this, because I believe that this diversity is a representation of God, and what He wants for us in our community.
Yeah, that's good.
Sure.
So as you're embracing this diversity, right? We all are going to have expectations on how people will receive us as our authentic selves in home, right? You've gone into this diverse space. Everybody is different. How do you manage and process those expectations in a healthy way, right? You expect people to respond to you a certain way. How do you manage that and process it?
I think that speaking about it is key. Because with expectations, right, it's stuff that happens internally in your own brain, and you think, okay, if I in this space step out in this kind of way, how are people going to receive that? And then you stay in your mind, and you never get to experience something because you have already put it in yourself that people will act as a certain way. And so I think for me, what has helped is being open about the struggles that I may be having when I want to do something and I feel like, oh, maybe people will think this or maybe people will think that. I think being in a place that is safe enough for me to express my expectations, and I know that even if people don't agree with my expectations, because a lot of times those expectations are based on lies, right? They're based on fears. They're based on they're not always based on truth. They're based on fear. So when I speak about it and I voice it out, I don't expect people to confirm my expectations, but in a safe space, I feel like people will process those expectations with me. And as I process with the people in my church family, then I think that, breakthrough happens. Yeah.
Sure.
What about you, Andre?
Yeah, I like what you said, Masane, about asking and speaking about it. Because sometimes we get into these spaces and we are expecting people to treat us in a certain way or receive us in a certain way or reject us for some reason. But those expectations are almost always based on assumptions as well. Maybe on past experiences, but I feel like it's key for us to actually get through that and to overcome those expectations, because it's unhealthy, it's irrational, it's unhealthy. To overcome those is to actually ask, to have conversations with people. I love the fact that Numa, in the diversity, it's so diverse that I can actually go to someone from a different culture and have a conversation and be candid and say, hey man, I feel like if I do this, then you're gonna react this way. Is that true? To just actually find out if that is the truth. Like you mentioned, it's not always true. I remember having this conversation with my wife, with Cornell, and she loves running, and she was on this run with a friend, but every time when they get to a hill, she's kind of like falls behind, and this guy is like leaving her. He's like running out, and she's like struggling up this hill. And so she wasn't enjoying her running anymore. And so I started asking a couple of questions. Okay, where are you running? Who are you running with? This and that. And then I said, okay, so she said this. Yeah, but he obviously thinks that I'm so weak and this and that. I said, oh, did he say that? And she's like, no, but it's obvious. And I'm like, but if he didn't say that, how can it be obvious? Why don't you ask him? And it's in that time when they ran again, she asked him, hey, do you think I'm a weak runner when we go up the hills? And he was like, no, I'm actually afraid that you might run faster than me. And so now I'm pushing myself up this hill so that I am not, I don't look weak, and because he was actually thinking and believing that she's a strong runner. That's why he was pushing himself so hard. But she had this assumption.
Yeah, that's good.
She had this expectation. This is what he thinks. Until she actually asked him.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important. That's the beauty of being in a diverse culture, that you can actually ask people. But we also have to overstep that kind of like thing of like that kind of like obstacle of, man, now I need to have a conversation with someone about this. That might be sensitive, but there's so much freedom in that actually.
Yeah. I think you just need to balance your expectations.
Yeah.
Right. And be okay with people not responding the way that you want them to respond.
Yeah.
But because it's going to happen, because we can't control how people are going to respond to us. And so it's just you've got to let your heart be open and just, put it out there, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are some of the challenges that you guys have had in being your authentic selves in home?
I think for me, one that I can think of and share right now, when I first came to Numa, I think what really drew me was the worship. I think this was when we were at the cinema, and I just loved the worship. It was just something in the worship that really drew my heart to Numa. But I think over time, I started feeling like there were certain expressions that I wanted to engage in during worship, and I maybe in my head started feeling like, oh, because this is how I see people worship in the space, then I have to also worship in this way, right? Even though there is freedom to worship how you want to worship, how the Spirit moves you to worship. But I think I put I don't know if it's expectations, but I put these views on the church that, okay, if everybody's worshiping this way, then that means that's how things should be done, right? Yeah, and so for quite some time, I worshipped in that way, and I didn't allow myself to fully express myself in worship how I would want to express myself. And so I think that's a challenge that I had. I don't think I still have it.
So how did you get beyond that, right? How did you get beyond feeling like you could only worship in a certain way? Like, what did you do?
I think it goes back to the safety of home, right? Because when you are at home and you feel safe, you also feel safe enough to bring every aspect of yourself to home, right? So as much as I bring the good parts of me and the parts that know things home, I also need to bring the parts of me that are in doubt, the parts of me that are maybe believing things that aren't true. And in this instance, I brought that part of me home, right? And I said, "Oh, hey guys, this is how I'm feeling. I feel like maybe during worship I can't do that or do this, you know." And people at church were like, "No, right? Freedom is a value in this house. You can express that freedom however you want to express it, right? You can worship however you want to worship." And so in feeling safe to bring that to conversation allowed me to break that and be like, "Oh, why wouldn't I be able to worship how I want to worship at church? Like, why did I ever think that I could hold myself back?" Yeah. So yeah.
Or even that you had to, right?
Oh, that I had to.
Yeah. What about you, Andre?
Yeah, I'm thinking about this now. I think there was a challenge because maybe I'm just gonna say it, that I'm white. I look like this. I don't have a mustache really. Like, yes, there's a little
like
bit,
this.
but yeah. But I look like the typical apartheid kind of like white Afrikaans racist guy, you know.
Okay.
And I've actually mentioned this on stage that this is what I look like. I look like a racist, you know. I have this look, and people were nodding. They were like agreeing with that. So then you walk into a space and you're like, "Oh man, you know, if I greet this person that's walking up to me, how are they going to respond? Are they going to, must I greet them in a certain way? Can I be open and hug and, you know, like high five or whatever? Or if I greet them like this or just say hi, what are they gonna think? What are they gonna say?"
Yeah.
And that has been something that I had to work through. Is, man, they need to get to know me sometime. So I'm just gonna be from the start, just be me. And it's what's in my heart. Yes, I do have to be sensitive and mindful of who I'm greeting. And every person is going to be different. But somewhere along the line, I also want them to get to know me. And that I'm not putting up any barriers, that this is me. You're going to meet me and this is me. And this is who I'm going to be every time. And so I think that's something that I had to navigate through and work through as like, I've struggled with man-pleasing. I've struggled with hoping that everyone will like me. And so I would conduct myself in a certain way, expecting and thinking that if I am like this, then they will like me. If I'm like this, but then I'm not authentic.
Yeah.
So it's not real. There's not that connection that is built on. It's not healthy, and it's not authentic. So, yeah, that's been a challenge.
Yeah.
Sure.
So those are some like external like wrestles. Like, what have you wrestled with internally? Like, with yourself that has kept you from being authentic? Right? I think for me, like one of my biggest struggles was like the rejection, feeling rejected and being afraid that authentic Kimberly wouldn't be accepted and feeling like I couldn't bring my full self to the party, right? So like you've mentioned a few things for yourself, but Masande, what are some things internally within Masande that you've struggled with that have kept you from in the past bringing your full authentic self?
In the past or in...
Or even now, right? Because I think we're all still in process, right?
We definitely all still in process. So I think that's good to always,
Yeah, it's true.
to always disclaim that work in process. I think there's so much that God is still working in me. I think, with Moses, what I really loved about last week's sermon, if you haven't seen it, check it out. But what I really loved about last week's sermon was that a lot of times we can focus on a Moses that goes into Egypt to free the people and take them to the promised land. And we can forget about the Moses that was having this wrestle of being born Hebrew, but being raised Egyptian. And that wrestle taking him out to the desert, and then the daughters calling him Egyptian out in the desert. So there's this wrestle, right, that Moses has to go through in order for him to be the man that God eventually uses to free his people. And so I think even with myself, having grown up in two cultures, I think sometimes I can be in this wrestle of which of these is my authentic self, which expression is my true authentic self. Is it the Xhosa Masande, or is it the westernized Masande that is the authentic self, right? And sometimes I wonder how, if I'm now to express myself, which of these people is coming out. And so I think even internally, I'm still at a place where I am trying to bridge these two worlds together. And from that place of bridging them together, my truest version can come out, because I believe that I'm a makeup of both. But I think sometimes there can be a struggle where I feel like, am I being too Xhosa? Am I being too westernized?
Sure.
And so, yeah, I think I'm constantly trying to bridge them together, because both of them make up who I am. I can't deny one for the other. I don't want to deny one for the other. And so I think I'm constantly having to learn what it means to really blend these two together, so that the truest version of myself can be what outflows.
So how has the environment that you're in your church home, how has it like encouraged you and helped you in that? Or has it? I shouldn't assume.
Yeah.
Good point. One, it has.
Okay.
And secondly, I think little things that might seem little, like being able to walk into church. Like I said, I grew up in a diverse church, but being able to walk into a church space in the southern suburbs of Cape Town and sing a Xhosa song in its fullness, I think that, as small as it may seem, is a huge thing, right? Because I can stand in the middle of church surrounded by different people, sing in Xhosa, and feel so seen, right? Feel like God sees me, the community sees me. And so I think it's moments like that happen that make me feel like I am living out my authentic self, that I can belt out worship ngesiXhosa in Claremont,
Sure.
and that be okay, not have someone bat an eye, not have, any insecurity about it.
Yeah.
I think there's so much power in that. Yeah.
No, that's good. That's good. So, Andre, this question is for you. Maybe somebody's like experienced hurt or burnout in their past, right? And they've come into a church home. How can home help them heal from it and be a place of rest for them? One, do you think it can? And then if so, how? How can home be a place of rest and healing?
So definitely it can. I think it should. I think home, as we expressed in the beginning, should be a place of safety, a place where you're cared for, and where you can grow and and become healthy. I think it's in the definition that you pointed out. So I think yes, definitely, church can be that. Home should be that as well. And I think it rests very much on the people that's already in the home, that is setting the culture, that is creating that healthy space for people that enters into such a place where they can experience that. I think for myself, I came out of when I joined Numa, I was in a very bad place, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and I think that the environment, the atmosphere that I stepped into, it was created already. It wasn't just a value, it was lived out, it was spoken about, it was mentioned, it was in conversations, and within the conversations that I had with the people that was in the church, and especially the mom and the dad, who was, they were carrying that culture of the home. That is what I experienced. Yeah. And so when people come in, they have to be vulnerable, I would say. Mm-hmm. I mean, they step into a culture with vulnerability already. When there's church hurt or hurt, doesn't matter what kind of hurt, not church hurt, but like hurt in their lives, that's already something that's very sensitive and vulnerable to people. Yeah. And I think when they step into that, there's going to be that resistance. We're like, hey, I'm checking things out now, but I'm really carrying these things. Is there a place of safety for me where I can actually open up and find healing and grow into a space where there's healing for your soul, I think people need to be open, and as you build relationships, be willing to share with someone. Yeah. Find someone that you are building a relationship with and are able to trust, and say, hey, this is my issues. This is what I've experienced in the past, or this is what I'm currently going through. And if that is the space that the home carries, the people that's already in the home, they're going to be open for that. They're going to be there and be like, hey man, we're a safe place. You can share.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. I think I would add, it's like you step into a space, right? But it's not somebody coming and praying for you, or someone giving you a scripture or the message that is going to heal you. Like, there's some personal work that you're going to have to do in that. And like you said, you've got to be vulnerable. You've got to be open. Yeah. You can't just walk into the space and expect, okay, I'm here, so now everything is going to be fine. There's still like personal things that you're going to have to do to make it happen. Yeah. Yeah. So last question. How would you encourage people who are like Moses, right? They have a story, they have a past, they've been displaced, and they've stepped into a home that looks different than what they've come out of. How would you encourage them today? Like, after our conversation, what would you want to leave them with? Like, in 2 seconds.
Jeez. What?
I'll go first.
Okay.
So,
thank you.
One is, don't discard your story, right? Don't discard your past or your experiences or the lessons that you've had in previous places. Add them on to what you're experiencing now in this new place, in this new home, and use them to both build upon who you are, your true authentic self, but then also keep being your true authentic self. Because like we said, we're all in process, right? We're not a finished work. Like, we're still shaking the Polaroid picture, right?
That's a great analogy.
You got it. It took you a minute, but you got it. It's okay.
Wow.
Anything else to add? Anyone?
I think being open is really big. If you are, the thing about Numa is that a lot of people who come because they are attracted to diversity, right? We've heard stories of people searching online diverse church, and our space comes out. So there is an initial interest and attraction to diversity that brings people into our home. But there's work that happens when it comes to diversity, right? It's not just for some people they just come in and it's okay. But for some people it does take work, and that's okay. It's okay if you have to wrestle through some things. It's okay if you have to ask questions. It's okay if you have parts of yourself that you feel like they might not be accepted because everybody's so diverse and you come from this one culture. It's okay if you are willing to open yourself up, if you are willing to be a part of community, if you're willing to grow, to learn, then this is that space for you, and you are going to thrive. But it's important for you to realize that there will be work that you need to do. But the Holy Spirit is here. People are here. Jesus is here. And like nothing compares to being able to worship and build with diverse people with different opinions, different backgrounds, different thoughts, different patterns, but be authentic in those differences. Nothing compares. So, yeah.
Andre, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think know that you're not alone. You're not the only person who struggles with stuff. Everybody struggles. Even the people who are in a healthy home struggle with stuff. And so I would encourage people to come and connect. Become part of the life of the church. There are different things that we do. There's life groups and Bible studies and different courses that we run. And within all of those things, we build relationship.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the biggest fear that people have, is that fear of rejection. It's like, hey, if I bring my issues, if I open up, then people are not going to want to hear it, and they'll rather keep it for themselves. And now they're going through these challenges alone.
Yeah.
And you're never going to find health for your soul like that. Moses was accepted into a family that was completely different than him. But they also allowed him, and I think his father-in-law was absolutely amazing. We don't know much about him, but the little things we do know about him, he had such a great voice speaking into Moses' life and guiding him and leading him in his own process of finding who he is and having those moments where he could like really think, is this who I am? This is who I am, and he could find himself really in that space of home. And I think that's where people need to realize is, man, you're going to step into a place where you are with other broken people. People are also on a journey of receiving health and becoming healthy, mentally, spiritually, physically, socially, relationally, be willing and open to connect with people.
For sure. Thank you guys for having this conversation with me, for sharing and allowing us into like your own personal journey within the Numa community. I think there's some really good nuggets that we can pull from the conversation today.